Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, where we take up the articles from the Hindu and discuss them as per the demands of Civil Services Examination. The topics of the discussion are listed on your screen. Now moving to the first article of the day that has appeared on the page 6 of the Hindu, basically talks about the issue of good governance and how the steps taken by the current regime is progressing towards the idea of inclusive and responsible governance in India. Now, UPSC under the GS2 syllabus and also under the GS4 syllabus talks about the good governance issues, and particularly in GS4 talks about probity in governance, concept of public service, and the philosophical basis of governance and that of probity. We'll try to understand the topic of good governance today from the perspective of GS4, as UPSC in the year 2016 has also asked questions related to governance, where it simply asked about what do you understand by the terms governance, good governance, and that of ethical governance. Now, this article is also important as India enters the Good Governance Week, which is celebrated from 19th of December to the 25th. And while analyzing this article, we'll try to understand what is the basis of good governance. Now, as per the World Bank, good governance is the manner in which power is exercised in the management of countries' economic and the social resources for the development. Now, this development has to be inclusive. There are basically 8 attributes of good governance as given by UN, which can be given the acronym of PEER, ACTR. Now, P here stands for participatory. Now, the governance has to be participatory in order to become good. Participatory meaning hereby the policies which are formulated for the general public at large should be formed only after due deliberations and inclusion of the views of various stakeholders. For example, in the current times, the policies or the government draft policies are kept in public domains and are inviting comments from the various stratas of the society such that the final legislation reflects the aspirations and the needs of the people and thus becomes participatory in nature. E here stands for effective. Now, the policy that is formulated should be effective in its implementation. Governance becomes good when the implementation is effective and the ends which are formulated can be realized at the earliest. The second E in the PEER here stands for being equitable and inclusive. Now, the policies that are made for public at large should be inclusive in their nature to promote the concept of inclusive growth, and at the same time shall be equitable in their nature, going beyond the concept of equality, adjusting for the historic and material inequalities in the society, and should be thus able to ensure equity among the people. The R here stands for response. Now, governance is not only about formulating new policies. It is also about revisiting old policies or the policies that are in action such that it represents the interest and the aspirations of the changing society and reflects the changing needs of the society. Thus, there is a need for continuous upgradation in the policies such that the policies which are made for general public at large remains responsive and the governance can be concluded as good. Now, A here stands for being accountable. Now, as we all know, governance involves a huge level of disposal of power in the hands of few. This power can be misutilized, as there is a common term that is used that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there is a need to maintain accountability among the public service officials and also among the public representatives such that they are accountable towards the public at large whose will they represent. And thus the governance can be said to be good if the public functionaries and the representatives are accountable through various mechanisms, for example, through that of RTI, Citizen Charter, Lokayukts, etc. Now, C here stands for consensus oriented. Consensus here is nothing but to accommodate the various aspirations of the different section of the society and also involving positive contributions from various stakeholders and even the opposition at large. At the same time, consensus is also important to reflect the regional aspirations and the needs which may differ with the geographical diversity of the nation or different level of socio and economic development across different regions of the country. T here stands for transparency. Now it is seen world over where the system have been more transparent or where the government system is more transparent and less opaque, the governance is better. The chances of corruptions are less and the public officials are more developmental oriented and the fruits of development are equally distributed among the different sections of society. Increasing transparency reduces not only the chances of corruption, but at the same time will also contribute towards greater trust among the public at large and help in realization of the ideals of good governance. Lastly, the R here stands for respect for the rule of law, meaning thereby none of the policies or the governance agendas should go against the rule of law of the society. The rule of law should be given supremacy while the implementation of any of the governance measure. So these were the 8 attributes of good governance as given by the United Nations. Now we'll try to understand what are the philosophical basis of good governance. Now the philosophical basis of good governance can be traced back to the time of Aristotle and that of Plato, where both argue that the virtue of justice can be ensured in the society if the governance is based on the virtues of courage, temperance, and that of wisdom. As given by Plato, a just state can only be established when it is ruled by just people, meaning thereby he talks about the concept of the philosopher king, a man who is ruled by wisdom, and such a rule will ensure good governance in the society at large. Another philosophical basis of good governance can be found in the deontological ethics and the approach of Kant, where he argues about that the ethical agent should follow the veil of ignorance while making the policy. There are also other philosophical bases which are related to that of social contract as given by Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, where they argue that governance can be termed as good if it fulfills the obligations under the contract, that is protects the right of the subjects, where rights related to life, liberty and property are guaranteed by the state, as there is a contract between the state and the subjects, that is the people at large, who have entered into a social contract with the state to ensure that these rights are better protected under their rule. Another philosophical aspect of good governance comes from the utilitarian theory that is given by Jeremy Bentham and J.S. Mill, who have advocated the highest aim of governance is to secure greatest good of greatest number. So this brings us to the question that what are the challenges before the good governance in the country? The first challenge that can be identified today for the good governance before any country is the scarcity of resources. Now the developmental initiatives are limited by the fact that the resources are not unlimited. And with the limited resources, it becomes very difficult to ensure development of general public at large. This can be even replicated in the issues of grassroots institutions like that of Panchayat Raj, which have the problems of triple F, that is the fund, functions and the functionaries. The grassroots organizations are devoid of basically funds and the necessary resources in the form of functionaries, which makes it very difficult to ensure development at the grassroots level. The second challenge to the good governance is the bureaucratic apathy. Now, there are various factors that are responsible for this bureaucratic, which can be termed as colonial hangover, lack of or the absence of code of ethics, or even being aversive to take tough decisions that can be helpful for the governance of public at large. Further, there have been growing politicization of the bureaucracy in the country, which ultimately leads to them becoming program neutral. Rather than being politically neutral, they become program neutral in their orientation And this is particularly detrimental for the schemes that have been initiated by the previous government, as the loyalties of the bureaucrats change with the change in power that happens after the election. Another challenge before the good governance is the establishment of crony capitalism between the capitalist and that of government, which is established by methods of electoral funding and which later translates into spoil system of crony capitalism, favoritism, and that of nepotism that the country has witnessed. Indian government in the recent time has taken various methods or various steps to make governance good, responsive, and accommodate the needs of the society. The first was the passing of the RTI Act of 2005. The Right to Information Act acted as a disinfectant to kill the germ of corruption from the system. The second step that has been taken by the government in the recent time is the Pragati portal. The proactive governance and timely implementation portal was launched by the current government. The old and the obsolete laws were also scrapped in the recent time. There is also promotion of various e-governance facilities like that of GST, online ITR, passport, eNAM, DigiLocker, which not only improves the ease of doing business in the country, which is reflected with the India's growing rank in the ease of doing business index, but it also minimizes the interaction between the public and the government officials and solves or address the issue of petty corruption that was prevalent in the Indian system. Government has also launched various citizen-centric initiatives like direct benefit transfer, that is DBT, PM Jan Dhan Yojana, etc. to improve the governance quality and minimize the loopholes in the system and basically attack any intermediaries that are present in the system. Good Governance Index was also launched by the government to infuse a feeling of competition among the various governments of the state, thus fostering the idea of competitive federalism where various states compete among themselves and adapt to the best practices that are present with them. So with this, we have understood what basically is good governance. What are the 8 attributes of good governance as per the UN? We have also seen the philosophical basis, challenges, and the various initiatives by the government to ensure good governance in the country. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured in page number 12 of the Hindu, basically talks about India-Nepal power trade. Now, UPSC under the GS2 syllabus has mentioned India's relationship with its neighborhood and has previously also asked questions related to various initiatives that were launched by India like Project Mosam and India's relationship with its neighborhood countries like that of Pakistan or more recently with that of Sri Lanka. So in this context, India's relationship with Nepal also becomes critical from the perspective of civil services means. Now the article is in news because of the India's opposition to use Chinese contractors in the hydropower projects that are happening in Nepal. The particular article talks about the Tamakoshi plant, which has been operational since 2021. Now the plant was constructed by a number of contractors which were chosen internationally and included that from China and Austria. The project is situated close to Nepal border with Tibet. The Tamakoshi River project in Nepal is also known as Nepal Three Gorges Dam, given its size and its contribution to make Nepal a power surplus country in the wet or the rainy seasons. India and Nepal were able to reach an agreement in 2014 which was called as Power Trading Agreement, wherein both countries agreed the exchange of electricity and cooperation in hydropower sector, and the Indian companies are involved in developing various projects in Nepal. However, situations changed in 2021. After the military standoff at line of actual control over Chinese transgression, the government of India then issued a number of financial measures on Chinese investment and imports. And it also promulgated the procedure for approval and facilitating import-export cross-border of electricity. The procedure includes a clause that prohibited trade with power plants that had ownership from a country that shares land border with India but has no bilateral power treaty with India, indicating particularly towards China. And this is a cause of contention today between India and Nepal as Tamakashi project has been developed with the help of China. Under this article, we will try to understand what are the various hydrographic issues between India and that of Nepal. We'll also try to understand what are the other issues between India and Nepal. And at last, we'll see how China plays an important role between the bilateral relationship between India and that of Nepal. So moving on with our discussion, we will first try to understand what are the various hydropower issues and the suggestions or the way forward to counter them. The first hydropower issue between India and that of Nepal is the issue of control and management of the hydropower station. Now, the hydropower projects that are developed by India are still regulated and controlled by Indian engineers and companies. Nepal has accused India for intentionally non-transfer of maintenance technology. Further, there is also a lack of confidence on both the sides, that is from India and that of Nepal. The power sharing in cooperation between India and Nepal is overshadowed by the water issues. Nepal accused India to get maximum benefits of the hydropower projects like that concluded on Kosi and Gandak, and the Nepali population, particularly those supporting the Maoists, are protesting against the Indian investment as they say that India prefers to invest in the region that benefits more to the Madhesi or the Terai region people. Further, India has many times refused to set up hydropower projects in the mountainous region, saying that the Nepalese mountainous regions are environmentally fragile. This has also led to anti-Indian sentiments and has also caused China to enter into the picture. In 2012, Nepal approved approximately 2 billion contract to China for the hydropower projects which was designed to supply electricity to China. On the other hand, Nepal has previously in 2017 scrapped various MOUs that were signed between India and Nepal, and the projects were then transferred to that of China. Further, there is also a lack of effective institutional arrangements and statutory provisions between the two countries. There are overlapping roles and responsibilities of the existing institutions in Nepal, which in turn affects the power trade negotiation between the two countries. These are the broader issues related to hydropower between India and Nepal. Now we'll try to understand some of the suggestions that can be seen as a way forward for this. To continue smooth hydropower cooperation, there is a need to adopt certain technical and legal steps that must be taken by the government from both the sides. The first step in this regard can be setting up of an independent regulator. This independent regulator will charge with a need for generation, transmission and distribution of electricity. Secondly, what can be done is an independent power transmission grid organization can be set up. This is required such that the surplus power can be transmitted across the border. Thirdly, there is also a need to establish transmission network. There is a need to strengthen the transmission network within the Nepal, which is at a precarious level presently. India should also provide transit facility for export of Nepali electricity such that the hydropower potential can not only be utilized but is also economically beneficial for the Nepal. Government should facilitate private sector participation in development of Nepal's power sector and particularly that of hydropower. Lastly, Nepal has not developed its hydropower potential due to a fear that if they undertake hydropower generation, India will assert dominance over the generated hydroelectricity. And such fears need to be allayed by India. As over a period of time, as we have seen with the case of Kosi River and the Gandak River project, a section of Nepal feels that barrages that are built upon these rivers have a normal lifespan of 50 years. But what is happening is that India is getting a lease of 199 years and India has a right to control it much beyond the actual lifespan of the barrage. And the Nepali population feels that India does not release adequate water for irrigation and during floods open the gates, leading to many villages getting submerged completely in Nepal. So there is a need to relook the various treaties that have been signed such that it does not forward the fears of Nepali section. Apart from hydropower issues, there are also certain key issues. The first such issue is related to border. Now, India and Nepal, as we all know, share a open, porous, and a non-standardized border. There is no requirement of visa or passport to move into each other's territory, and there is no upper limit mentioned of staying in India or Nepal. India and Nepal are thus facing a long range of border issues. The first such issue faced is of problems of related to trafficking. That is trafficking of drugs, arms and ammunition along with that of women and children. The second issue that is faced between India and Nepal is of operationalization of transnational terrorist groups and transnational crime syndicates who have established their base in Nepal. Further, there is also issue of fake currency and support to fundamental forces that is happening via Nepal. Since the end of Cold War, border has created various concerns for India. Today, intelligence reports suggest that Pakistan has been taking advantage of open border to infiltrate into India and it uses the Nepal border to pump fake currency into the India with an intention to destabilize the Indian economy. Further, the criminals on both the sides use each other's territory for taking refuge, making it tough for law enforcement agencies to track and catch criminals. India-Nepal region border is almost 400 kilometers and it holds 2 integrated checkposts and 5 checkposts with immigration and custom facilities. There are also various soft checkposts. But seeing the length of the border, this number of checkposts are inadequate. So we need to understand what can be the solution or the way forward to solve the border issue between the two countries. The first solution that can be given is to open more transit routes and integrated checkposts as we have seen under the point 5 that the checkposts are limited and this needs to be increased as the current checkposts are inadequate. Secondly, what can be done is a cross-border crime control action plan that can be prepared and jointly enforced. Further, Sahastra Seema Bal can be empowered with modern technology and also empowered under the Passport Act to arrest criminals. In certain areas, there is also issue of clear-cut border demarcation, especially on the regions related to Susta, Kalapani, Lippu Lake because of changing course of rivers and there is a need to come on negotiations for these areas to be properly defined. There is a need to incorporate technology like that of drones and e-surveillance to ensure border patrolling and surveillance through non-physical barriers. Further, specialized forces for border security like Sahastra Seema Bal and there should be an increased role of police on both the sides of border. Further, there is also a need to strengthen the public transportation system as most of the criminal activities happens through the private vehicles. So there is a need to strengthen the public transportation system that is owned by respective government across the border and restriction over the private vehicles to cross the border to regulate trafficking. There can be also other ways to help solve the problem that is increase in the no man's land area and adaptation of methods like increased fencing so that the problem of porous border is solved. There were also demand of the standardization of border between India and Nepal that was put forward by the Nepali leadership. However, these measures need to be adopted such that the border issues can be solved between India and Nepal up to quite an extent. The next issue that can be discussed between India and that of Nepal is the economic dependence of Nepal on India or the economic issue between India and Nepal. Now, it has been said that the Nepali people who are working in India face economic exploitation like less salary, long working hours, unequal payments, delay in post-retirement benefits of Nepali people who are working in the government services. There is also a problem of double seal policy. India's transit facility to Nepal for third-party export is the key issue here. Though that India has allowed the use of Kolkata port by Nepal for third country trade and designated custom points have been established for the same, India uses a policy of double seal wherein the consignments coming from Nepal are rechecked and an extra seal is provided for the security reasons. But because of these double seal policy, the consignments get delayed and is not going well with the Nepal. Nepal has also accused for making standards of Nepalese company to get registered in India very high and highlights that India uses differential parameters when it comes to Nepali companies, especially the pharmaceutical centers. The next issue is related to that of heavy machinery. Now, Nepal, due to its geography, is dependent on India, and 95% of the Nepalese trade happens through India. The Nepal purchases heavy machinery from India. This heavy machinery that is purchased from India can be bought to India for repairing for a period of 3 years only. After that, Indian engineers will have to visit Nepal. Nepal accuses that the Indian engineers have very high charges and this affects the business in their country. Now, Indian exports, when compared to that of Nepal, is tremendously high and the trade deficit is in favor of India. India exports goods of more than $6 billion to Nepal, while at the same time import goods only of close to $450 million. Nepal is demanding promotion of Nepali trade in India. Nepal also wants to review the trade treaty that was signed between India and Nepal in 1996 and was revised in 2009 to be reviewed again such that the Nepalese dependence on India can be reduced and favorable trade-off agreement can be achieved between the two countries. So these were the economic issues between India and that of Nepal. Now we'll see how Nepal uses China card or how China plays an important role between the bilateral relationship of India and Nepal. Now if we analyze the role of China, since the time of Prime Minister Nehru, India's Nepal policy has been China-centric, or China has been well accommodated while formulating India's policy towards Nepal. Prime Minister Nehru at that time had principal role of securing India's security and cleared about the position of Nepal with respect to Indian foreign policy, where he exclaimed that India cannot have as intimate relationship with any country as it needs to develop with that of Nepal. Now the Nepali elites have well played with the India's insecurity and have kept on using the China card against India. And India at the same time could not resist or stop the growing influence of China in its backyard. Not only Nepal has procured arms from China that is violative of the 1950 Friendship Treaty between India and Nepal. At present, the Chinese investment in Nepal is close to $8 billion, while at the same time, Nepal's own GDP is just $21 billion. So this we can understand as another issue of debt trap diplomacy that China has been practicing in the India's neighborhood. If we take the example of Sri Lanka or Pakistan, and thus Nepal also falls in the same admit. Nepal has also expressed its interest to join the Belt and Road Initiative. Nepal has been keen on inviting Chinese investment and is taking steps to develop overland trade connectivity by constructing dry port. Now the basic premise of the Chinese presence in Nepal is that Nepalese territory is not used by Tibetans for breeding ground of discontent. And in the last decade, the Chinese engagement with Nepal has got strengthened at the soft policy levels also. As China and Nepal are working closely together to develop this entire Himalayan belt into a transit region that is the convergence of economic interest of India, China and Nepal. China has today made inroads in the infrastructure, education and the health sector. In the last 5 years, the interaction between Chinese and Nepali government have increased. Students of Nepal are today moving to China in large numbers. The trade and the number of projects with China has drastically increased. Nepal is today using geopolitics policy rather than the pro-Chinese policies. As the geopolitics is also important, as China has the limitation of geography and thus can only play a limited role with Nepal. Maoism in Nepal has been encouraged by China and they have potential links with Indian Naxalite movement also. Today, we can see that Nepal is developing a new framework to deal with India and negotiate with India using the China factor. There has been a demand to renegotiate India-Nepal Treaty of Friendship between India and China. Now, Nepal at the same time is also playing the geopolitics and uses China as the factor to balance that of India and not to antagonize India. Nepal has asserted at the same time that its relationship with China is purely economic and will not be hurting the Indian strategic interest in any way. But the rising Nepal and China cooperation signals that Himalayas are not the barriers anymore for India, and a strategy to check the Chinese engagement is also important. India needs to engage with Nepal in multiple dimensions and increase dependency, which will automatically distance it from China. So this brings us to the question that what India needs to do. At present, the Nepal is using the China factor. India need not to be overly concerned or should not become too complacent in the procedure. As Nepal cannot overlook India, even if electricity is produced between China and Nepal, it has to be sold to India. Besides geography as a barrier, the people-to-people contact between India and Nepal, cross-cultural links between the people of India and Nepal are great cementing factor for the relationship between India and Nepal. India thus wants Kathmandu from falling into the trap of Chinese debt trap diplomacy. But at the same time, India needs to work out on its own strength. India needs to improve its position on the implementation of the projects. Thus, we have discussed what are the various hydrographic issues, the border and the economic issues facing India and Nepal, and how China is also playing a key role between the bilateral relationship of India and Nepal. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured in the Hindu on page 11 basically talks about the Northeastern Council. Now UPSC under the GS2 talks about appointment to various constitutional posts, power, function, responsibilities, and at the same time also talks about the statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial bodies. Thus, Northeastern Council has to be studied in this regard. Also, Northeastern Council or other councils need to be understood as a method of boosting federalism and to improve the working of competitive and cooperative federalism in India. Now the article is in news regarding the Golden Jubilee celebration of the Northeastern Council that was organized in Meghalaya, and where Prime Minister Modi exclaimed that centre was now spending money close to 7 lakh crore as against the 2 lakh crore after the India's independence. Prime Minister Narendra Modi further exclaimed that the government is investing heavily in Northeast India, with the government motto being Act Fast for the Northeast and Act First for the Northeast. Now established in 1971 and formally inaugurated in 1972, Northeastern Council is the nodal agency for the social and economic development of the Northeastern region, which comprises of the 8 states. We'll try to understand about Northeastern Council, its formation, the functions, and the various challenges that it currently faces. Now, as we have seen that Northeastern Council is the nodal agency for economic and the social development of the Northeastern region and consists of 8 states of Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, Nagaland, Sikkim and that of Tripura. Now the Northeastern Council was constituted in the year 1971 by an Act of Parliament. So The Northeastern Council is a statutory body, and this source of information can be utilized to frame a question in the prelims. The constitution of the council has marked the beginning of a new chapter of concerted and planned endeavor for the rapid development of the Northeastern region. Now, the Northeastern Council came into being by an Act of Parliament of India, the Northeastern Council Act 1971, and it is an advisory body in respect to the socio-economic development and balanced development of the northeastern areas. Advisory body meaning thereby is that the recommendations are not binding on the government. The members of the Northeastern Council consist of governors, the chief ministers of the 8 member states, including that of Sikkim, apart from the chairman and 3 members who are nominated by the President of India. Thus, the membership can also be asked, or a question can be framed in the prelims examination. And we have also seen the nature of the body, that is advisory in nature. With regards to the functions of the Northeastern Council is constituted for performing the following functions. It is constituted to discuss any matter in which some or all the states are represented in the council, have common interest, and advise the central government and the government of the state concerned to the action to be taken in any such matter. That is the matter of common interest in the field of economic and social planning, any matter concerning interstate transport and communication, matters related to power, flood control, projects of common interest, etc. Further, it has also tasked with providing a coordinated regional plan, and this plan will be in addition to the state plan. Thus, it will highlight the importance of the region as a common place and reflect collectively the interest of the northeast region of the country. It will also prioritize projects and the schemes that are to be included in the regional plan and recommend stages in which the regional plan may be implemented. It will also decide on the locations of the projects and the schemes that are to be included under the regional plan to the center. Though the Northeast Council was constituted with very lofty ideas, however, the ability and the utility of the council to resolve such problems as the crisis related to border disputes between the northeastern states and linguistic minorities seems to be doubtful. So far, the council have done little to prevent the border disputes and the disputes between the minority. The border disputes which have been settled are settled with the efforts of the center and not to that of council. An area where the council has played a decent role is with regard to the economic and social planning. It has done good in areas related to interstate road transportation, coordination of irrigation plans, pooling of facilities, higher education. Basically, thereby, the councils are doing well where there are chances of little or no disputes. And where the chances of disputes are higher with regard to border dispute or the linguistic disputes, the councils are not faring better. Another thing that needs to be pointed out is that the zonal council lacks unanimous support, and thus we have analyzed the functioning of the Northeastern Council. We have also seen in our discussion how and why Northeastern Council were formed, what are the primary functions, and what kind of body the Northeastern Council is. Thus, the Northeastern Council can be seen as a method of increasing the federalism in the country by jointly putting a coordinated regional plan for the northeastern region, as well as the same time it will also collaborate over the issues of common interest. But at the same time, we have also seen where the council lacks in the functioning or solve the real challenges of federalism related to borders and the issue of linguistic minorities. Moving on to the last article of the day that has featured in the Hindu on page 10, basically talks about the missile destroyer INS MORMUGAO. Now this topic is particularly important from the prelims point of view, as UPSC in the year 2014 has asked questions related to various missile, and Agni 4 missile was asked about, and after that also UPSC has continuously asked questions related to various developments in the field of security and defense. Now the article is in news because Indian Navy has commissioned a new stealth guided missile destroyer that was built by the Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders Limited and is known as INS MORMUGAO. The ship is named after a key port in Goa and was commissioned a day before the Goa Liberation Day. Now the ship has been commenced under the Project 15B. We'll try to understand what is Project 15B, as Project 15B can directly be asked in the prelims examination, where the question can be framed as Project 15B was recently in news and is related to. So thus we need to understand what is Project 15A, 14B, etc. Now the under Project 15A, Indian Navy has commissioned 3 guided missile destroyers earlier of Kolkata class. That was INS Kolkata, INS Kochi and INS Chennai. Another thing to understand here is that of class. So what is meant by the term ship class? Basically, ship class refers to a group of vessels that have similar tonnage, usage, capabilities and weaponry. The contract for 4 guided missile destroyers, which were more advanced than the Kolkata class, was signed in 2011. And this was called as the Project 15B. And the first ship under this was INS Visakhapatnam, which was commissioned in 2021 November. The ship has been designed by Warship Design Bureau, which is Indian Navy's in-house warship design body, and was built by the Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, as we have discussed in the beginning. The 4 ships of Project 15B were to be named after 4 major cities around the countries, out of which INS Visakhapatnam and now INS MORMUGAO have been commissioned, and INS Imphal and Surat are yet to be commissioned. So this brings us to the question that what is the strategic significance behind such guided missile destroyers or the Project 15B or 15A for that matter. The first strategic significance that can be highlighted is because of their speed and their strike capabilities. Guided missile destroyers are key assets in various types of naval operation. These carry short-range surface to air missile and subsurface attack missiles and are capable of anti-aircraft and anti-submarine warfare also. Further, under the Project 15B, that is INS Visakhapatnam and INS MORMUGAO, they are one of the most advanced ships in the Indian Navy, which can operate as independent offense platform without being part of large formation. Thus, these ships are key in ensuring or act as a primary asset in the modern network-centric warfare. With this, we have seen what was Project 15A and Project 15B. We have also understood the term ship class and what is the strategic significance of the guided missile destroyers.